So, the Stop Mass Incarceration Network called for a National Hoodie Day on June 10th. This was something to be held all around the country, where people would step out saying, "We are all Trayvon Martin, the whole damn system is guilty." Why? Because we remember a year ago, why was this call issued from the Stop Mass Incarceration Network? Because we remember over a year ago when the 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was hunted down and killed. His killer was allowed to walk free for over a month, while his dead body was then treated like the criminal, given drug tests and background tests, while his killer was given medical treatment, and they found no reason to prosecute him. That was until thousands of people across the country stepped out and demanded justice and said, "We are all Trayvon Martin." And now we have a trial. So this call was issued from the Stop Mass Incarceration Network because the only way that there's going to be justice in this case is going to be if people continue to step out and demand it. I and others from the Stop Mass Incarceration Network and from RevCom.us went down to Sanford to be part of making this Hoodie Day happen down there. Now I just want to say, when you walk through the streets of Goldsboro, which is the historically black town there in Sanford, the word New Jim Crow hits you in a couple different levels. On the one hand, there's the way in which we all know it's to evoke the old forms of segregation and discrimination that existed in this country. But it also echoes the continuation of that kind of segregation and discrimination. When you walk, when you hear the stories of people, which is what we heard when we went down there. One woman told us about how she was accused of not paying her tab at the Burger King, and the worker at the Burger King said, "You niggers are always trying to get something for free." And the manager came out and defended the statement, saying, "Oh, she didn't mean it like that." How the fuck else do you mean that? Excuse me. So, like I said, we went down there to say, "We are all Trayvon Martin, the whole damn system is guilty." And we say that because what's at stake here is, yes, we want justice for Trayvon and his family. It's a horrible thing that they happened, and to have his killer walk free is something that still hurts. And frankly, for a lot of the people there, they're very passionately angry over that. But it also, what's at stake is whether or not killers like George Zimmerman can get the green light to carry out these kinds of murders. What does it say to every youth out there if someone like Trayvon Martin could just be gunned down and then George Zimmerman is allowed to walk free? Now I remember, I'll talk a little more about why I personally felt like I wanted to go down there, but I remember over a year ago, maybe not over a year, but about a year ago, I went down to Sanford actually with a Basics bus tour. And I talked to a lot of young people down there in the South, and I wasn't so much surprised that a lot of the kids knew who Trayvon Martin was, but what struck me, at least at the time, was that a lot of them knew who George Zimmerman was. They knew his name very clearly, could tell, kids who couldn't pronounce a lot of other words very clearly could tell you who George Zimmerman was. And they talked about him not so much as you and I would talk about a person we know, but the way I remember talking about El Chupacabra, which is a Puerto Rican basically version of the boogeyman. It's this mythological monster that's out there that's, well, the Chupacabra is eating your goats, but the boogeyman is always out there to get you. This is a microcosm, if you will, a small example of the haunting specter of death and brutality that hangs over every black and Latino youth in this country, whether it's the George Zimmermans or the cops of this country. Everywhere they are haunted by this from the moment they're 8 or 9 years old. I'm not talking about 15-year-olds, I'm talking about 8 or 9-year-olds. So this is part of what's at stake in this battle. And again, over a year ago, we saw the powerful outpourings of people all around the country, because this resonated with a lot of people who knew what it was like to be treated like generations of suspects, and who are treated like criminals, guilty until proven innocent, while many like Trayvon don't survive long enough to prove their innocence. They stepped out, and many people, had their backs, including people who were maybe not under the gun in the same kind of way. This is a big strength people have, and people don't know, and people are often kept from seeing that it's exactly when they act in that kind of way that we begin to see the gears of justice turn. That was the only reason that there was a trial in the first place, and if there's going to be justice, it's only because of that, and because of what this system is afraid of and what it saw when people did step out. And again, we need to make the resistance more powerful to this, because it was frustrating to see how much they were able to get away with sending the message that people need to stay home. People need to just sit back and watch it. Let the it's in the courts now. Let's see what the courts will do. And if anyone who has been paying attention, they really are greasing people up to take a whole lot of shit if this guy's allowed to walk. But because of what we did, another message was also sent, was that there are people who are not going to just sit back and watch. People all around the country did step out on June 10th for this National Hoodie Day and say, we are all Trayvon Martin, and this whole damn system is guilty. National headlines, and frankly international news too, was made by this delegation that went down there to say, we are all Trayvon Martin, and to show that people actually can stand up. And it was interesting talking to people down there. Again, a lot of work has been done to tell people to stay home, but there were also a lot of people, I remember we went to church one day, not so much to pray, but to talk to people, and this woman came up and was talking to somebody and said, I didn't know we were all wearing our t-shirts today. If I knew that, I would have worn my t-shirt. and I said, well, I didn't know we were all wearing t-shirts either. Because this one guy had come sort of on his own wearing his Trayvon Martin t-shirt, and then he ran into a whole bunch of people standing outside the church with signs saying we were all Trayvon Martin. And people didn't know that there was this, that they were not alone, that there were other people there who wanted to act and who were, basically, because no one had called on them to do it. People were not acting and rising up together. In fact, the opposite was happening, where people were being told to just sort of watch and to be more concerned with the dangers or the supposed dangers of people getting out of hand if they demand justice, and to be more concerned about that than actually getting justice in the first place. And so we had to tell people, look, justice is not just a nice thing that if we get it, that's cool, and if not, that's fine also. We have to, we're demanding justice, and we have to fight for it. And so some people did join us from the neighborhood, but not enough. However, I did hear that in New York, people came out, about 100 people in the pouring rain stepped out for this National Hoodie Day, and that did make major news also, including in the Amsterdam News. And again, this is to draw the contrast between, on the one hand, they were trying to, if people didn't step out, look at it this way. The headlines would have read, the trial of George Zimmerman begins and people stay home. And that would have sent a message to all the people, who are watching this, that all that they can do is sit home and wait for the verdict. And I'm driving towards a larger point too, because part of what we were there in terms of fighting for justice is to connect this up with something bigger. Like I said, I have a personal connection to this case. Look, I grew up in places like the Bronx. I know what it's like to be treated like a suspect and a potential criminal at every turn. But I also transformed into a revolutionary. I got connected up with Bob Avakian and the Revolutionary Communist Party. And everything I'm doing is about putting an end to the long nightmare that not just those youth have to live with and grow up with, but people all over the world have to suffer. And in moments like this, I'll tell another story. Sorry, I'm full of stories. I was on the bus talking to a young woman who works with Legal Aid, and I was talking to her about the hunger strike around the prisoners. And she was expressing some frustration and confusion. She was coming from where she was coming from, but she was like, it's hard to get people to really talk about and act around something that the way she put it was abstract, like the abuses in a whole prison system, something that's more systemic. And, two things have to be said about that. One is, a lot of that's not very abstract, as you just heard in that letter from that prisoner. a lot of it's very real, and people don't really know shit about it. And then there's millions and millions of people who are connected to people who are suffering in that kind of way, and that needs to be brought out to people who don't know and who are not connected up in that way to confront the reality of what people are facing. But then the other point too is, you know, as this current issue of Revolution newspaper puts it, there are these times which our strategy statement said are sudden jolts and breakdowns in the normal functioning of society which compel many people to question and to resist what they usually accept. And the murder of Trayvon Martin was one of those breakdowns and jolts in society where many people began to see more naked and more clearly, you know, the very deeply rooted crimes of this system and one of the key fault lines and injustices. And they began to see the potential for people to actually act to stand up against that. And that's what, that's really what's at stake in this fight for justice for Trayvon Martin. Is this larger fight? Are people going to also raise up their sights to fight against this whole system of mass incarceration and the whole system which carries out not just mass incarceration but wars all over the world, is spying on its own citizens, is carrying out tremendous war crimes and crimes against humanity, and then going after people like Bradley Manning and Snowden who expose these crimes, and never going after any of the people who actually carry out these crimes. Are people going to be able to stand up to that and raise their sights to all of that, transform themselves as they're standing up to all this? Or are they going to once again get the message, yes, you fought back, okay, we made a show, we got the guy on trial, but in the end, he's going to be found not guilty anyway, and all your struggles will be for naught. No, we can't let that be the message that people take home. This fight for justice for Trayvon Martin, again, is very much a part of this fight against this whole system of mass incarceration. And for me, this is part of raising people's sights to the highest goal of making revolution and getting to a whole different world beyond all of this. That might be all I have to say. But I guess I'll just continue to read from that little excerpt from the strategy statement, is that no one can say exactly what will happen in these situations, how deep this crisis can go, and in what ways and to what extent it might pose challenges to the system as a whole, and to what degree and in what ways it might call forth unrest and rebellion among people who are normally caught up in or feel powerless to stand up against what this system does. So what we do actually has a lot to say about how far that can go and how far people's sights get lifted. Again, through something like Trayvon Martin, revealing to people the racial, there's a thread through this. Why, Trayvon Martin, the hunger strike, there's a thread, or what Carl Dix has called very adequately a pipeline, right? On the ground, racial profiling, whether it's the vigilante murders or the police murders or the stop-and-frisks in New York or the gang injunctions, there's the, or you can go on and on, the housing discrimination, employment, all that stuff, the racial profiling and the massive criminalization of generations of youth, and then the massive incarceration. That sets people on a pipeline, a massive incarceration, where people are again treated as less than human beings, not even deserving of basic rights, treated like, sometimes treated like cargo, sometimes worse, like lab rats to be, brutalized and experimented on. Although it's not for the interest of any knowledge, it's just to torture people who have been dehumanized. Through these struggles, again, in this fight for justice for Trayvon Martin, that needs to be raised to the highest level. What's at stake here is the criminalization of Black and Latino youth around this country, and the fight to put an end to all of that and to strengthen the people's resistance against that, and not to just be broken down and isolated off from each other. And so, I'll stop there, but that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for having me.